Welcome to today's workshop. I am Jessica Neighbor and I run Love Your Voice, a community for women in midlife to speak up so they can feel fully seen and heard. And today's workshop is taking on a pretty big topic. I'm going to admit I've been feeling a little spicy. So, this is all about how to help take down the patriarchy using our voices in midlife for positive change. So, what we're doing is addressing a system that has been baked into society for 10,000 years and how we can navigate it, and how I believe that in midlife, we have a really unique position from living a lot and from also hopefully having quite a bit of life ahead of us to kind of in the midway stop and really use our voice for effective change. So today we're going to talk about the story that we grew up believing about women's voices and women speaking up, truth to power. We're going to talk about effective things we can do now at this age. And we're going to talk about some longevity ways to pace our voice for the decades to come so that we can continue to, advocate for those who need it. And on that note, longevity, I'm going to take a sip of my tea. So welcome. I see that Urzi joined. Welcome, welcome. I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly, but welcome. I'm glad you're here. And yeah, I think, truth be told, I was at the No Kings March recently, and it really fired me up and just got me thinking so much about how we can effectively use our voice. And I'm not here to tell you which way to use it. I'm here to encourage you to use it and to feel empowered to use it. So, what I believe, and I think probably many of you do as well, is that every time a woman speaks up, she's challenging a system that can benefit from her silence, right? And we see in uh, this society, this culture at this moment, that there's a lot of pressure for women to sort of regress and retrograde and go back to a very traditional role. And, you can take a really deep dive into what that's about as far as Christianity. It's fascinating stuff. But today, I want us to think specifically about patriarchy and why it can hurt women or people who identify as when we speak out. Remember that the patriarchy was built by people. And for a long time, I kept using this analogy about sexism and racism, for that matter, which was it's like the water we're swimming in or the air we breathe, right? It's just so embedded in us. And in some ways, that's true. It's been around for as long as I've been alive. Um, I didn't create this. And yet it can make that feel very fixed. And so by remembering that people actually built this system, right? That the system for patriarchy was actually about centralizing power for land ownership. Once people started farming, doing less of the migration and stayed in one place, they suddenly started to want to accrue wealth, and it suddenly became a whole mission to have people work for them, have women bear children to pass on inheritance and wealth. And there was born the patriarchy. Now, I'm not a historian. I am just summarizing some of the wonderful books I've read. But to say that every time we feel like it's the water we swim in or the air we breathe, that's not true because that's concrete, right? We can't change the air, we can't change the water. We can change patriarchy, we can change racism. It's a big hill, and we know that it's a long ways to go. But I think having that belief in the way we use our voice will empower us every time we can be discouraged. Another beautiful way of thinking about this comes from Isabel Wilkerson. So I want to quote her. I'm just pulling up her quote here because I think it's a really beautiful quote. Um, just a moment. When you live in an old house, this is from her book cast. When you live in an old house, you may not want to go into the basement after a storm to see what the rains have wrought. Choose not to look, however, at your own peril. The owner of an old house knows that whatever you are ignoring will never go away. And I love this way that Isabel Wilkerson, a wonderful author of Caste, frames this because we inherited this. We did not create this, and that goes for the men as well, right? We're not blaming anyone in this day for creating this. However, how we work within this system is either going to help or hinder progress. And so I think that as a voice coach here, one of the best things we can do is to use our voice, and we can use it in really daily ways. So as you're listening to this, the first step I always love women to do is to think about what sort of messaging you received when you were younger about how to use your voice. Were you ever shamed about using your voice, about being outspoken, about being loud or labeled too much? Or were you labeled as too shy and not loud enough? Were you made to feel wrong somehow about how you communicated? I call that your voice scar. And I think that for us to be really effective in advocacy, we want to heal what feels like there's a wound inside of us before we go and speak up. Because let me tell you, every time we kind of step out into the public forum, those old scars, those old stories rear their ugly heads. And I actually think it's through the examining of them and taking them on that we move past them. So you can do this in a couple of ways, right? You can think back to the messaging you got in your family, to the message you maybe got in your specific culture or specific, area where you were brought up. And then also think about the messaging that the greater society was telling you. And then what were some of the messages that maybe you absorbed and continue to tell yourself to this day, right? So I can use myself as an example. I was told often that I was very dramatic and I was too loud and I was too much. And for a long time, that haunted me, that bothered me. I had to work on ways to accept that that was okay, find a balance for myself about what that meant. But as long as I believed that, and I did, I struggled with that for a long time, it got in the way of me just like honestly communicating how I felt. So that's one thing. And that's step one, I believe, in how we can actually advocate for others is by first examining what's like inside our own house, right? What's built us and what needs a little renovating. Don't you think too that in midlife, what a beautiful time to do this? Lots of things start shifting in our physical body, also emotionally. I think the way we frame it is so key because I believe that this is a moment that we can reclaim parts of ourselves that felt shut down or muted by being younger. And we can also pivot to different ways that we want to be moving forward. So there is such a unique perspective in midlife. We tend to have a little more air in our tires. We have resources, and what we can do with it is a very powerful thing. So I just want to ask you and for you to ponder on this question, which is what early messages did you hear about how women should sound or behave? And just think how that impacted you or other women in your life. And are you still holding on to any of those messagings? And a nice mini exercise, because I always like to look forward and think about what we can do with this information, is I want you to imagine yourself speaking passionately about something that you really believe in and that you want to advocate for. And I want you to imagine yourself doing it in a totally positive, effective way. How easy or difficult is that for you to imagine yourself doing? What kind of questions or doubts come up? Also, what kind of excitement does that build in you to really think, wow, I could do this. I could do this. Oh, we just want to have that can do attitude. So the visualization will disrupt the old story that we tell ourselves about what we can and cannot do. And it can actually rewire our thinking patterns about ourselves. Are we going to have to challenge that old thinking pattern a lot? Absolutely. And it's going to be actually through the doing of speaking out that it's going to happen. We aren't going to be able to do it until we take some sort of action. But the good news is that you don't have to lead a march or a movement for these things to happen. So let's talk now about step two, which is how to really use your voice for positive change. Speaking up is activism. When you speak honestly, when you speak your truth, that is activism. If you are stopping to think how you are serving somebody else, especially if you're feeling like there's a male gaze, which unfortunately most of us have internalized, that is what we would call patriarchy. And everyone suffers under patriarchy too. I am raising two teenage sons. They are dealing with what it means to be masculine. They are dealing with how much they can emote and be emotional. So I believe that patriarchy hurts us all. And so we all should speak out against it. And we should all have conversations about it to address these things. So, having conversations with yourself, having conversations with your family around the dinner table is a wonderful first step if you feel safe to do that, because that's going to build up this muscle for you to practice speaking out with your safe people. If your family isn't your safe people, and unfortunately, in this day and age, that is sometimes the case, you want to find a group or a community that is like minded so that you can feel like you are being supported to speak your mind. So you are welcome to come join Love Your Voice. It's my mission to help support women to speak up more confidently. And by doing that, you're going to build up that muscle of speaking out, of believing in yourself, of getting fully behind yourself, and of hopefully dropping some of the old baggage or in a more graceful way, just thinking about how to move it aside, to acknowledge it, see the old messaging we have, but create a new pathway that is going to be stronger pathway that you're going to wind up going towards. Um, Another way you can do this simply is through writing. So if the speaking out feels a bit too confrontational or too assertive for you, how can you write about your advocacy? How can you be an author or here on Substack in notes, share your thoughts and opinions? Online has its challenges because I think that even though it's an incredible place to speak up, it also is an incredible place for trolls and, very hostile people to get involved in that dialogue. And then I think it can be very counterproductive. But I think if you feel like you want to do that as a first step, by all means, that is a great way to do it. And then let us not forget that to advocate using your voice can also be funneled through somebody else. So if there's someone out there who you admire who is speaking up for other people, you can follow them, you can fund them, you can support them if they're running for office. There's so many ways that you can do this in more of a background way. And it's through the coalition, it's through the doing it together that I do believe we get more powerful. And I think that when we do it with other people, again, that reflect back that we are actually powerful, then we're going to believe that more for ourselves, which I think is why the No Kings March was so inspiring for so many of us, because it was a great indication that we're not alone, that we have a common good in mind. And even though there was this wonderful array of different signs and different causes, it was all coming back to the idea that we want freedom, we want progress, we want to move forward and not move back, right? And that's also why when we talk about patriarchy, it's going hand in hand with racism, with ableism, with all of the issues, because if patriarchy is set up to serve a certain kind of man, then everyone under that suffers. And as you notice, some of the most successful men don't seem very happy. So I don't know in the end who it actually benefits, you know? So those are just ways for you to start building up your voice in small ways. So I want to encourage you to take a mini step, which is to do one small action, whether that means being a mentor or volunteering or advocating or just sharing your story, doing it in a more bold way in conversation, just sharing your opinion more, right? I really think that that in and of itself is a great first step. If you've been taught to be a good girl like I was and very agreeable, sharing your opinion, especially if it's maybe not everyone else's opinion, is a great step to do this. So, the final step in today's workshop I want us to think about is how to protect our voice and energy. Because also, as women in midlife, we know that we have limited resources as far as our voice, our energy, our time. And I think that that can make us very effective because we're going to protect our actual voice. We're going to know where to put our energy and where not to. I've been noticing lately for myself that even as mad and outraged I want to get about every offensive thing I see and hear, I have to stay focused because that outrage just keeps my system spinning in a spiral. And then I actually don't feel like I can be very productive. So I think there's a way that trying not to get caught up in the 24-hour news cycle, the sensationalism of everything going on. And my goodness, we know there's so much to get upset about. I think will help us have a little bit of a healthy boundary and a healthy distance to stay focused on what we can actually achieve. Otherwise, I don't know about you, but I can go into overwhelm, I can go into freeze, I can go into apathy. And I think we see a lot of people, unfortunately, going into that. And I don't blame them. I think it's a safety precaution. And there's messaging often for women our age to get quieter and kind of recede back, right? But I don't know about you. I'm just feeling so much more powerful. I'm enjoying being more outspoken. I care less, like the wonderful Melanie Sanders Club, the We Do Not Care Club. It's just a liberating time in life to start speaking out in ways that I didn't know I could beforehand. So remember that mentally setting boundaries, mentally making sure you're not on social media all the time or in a news cycle, surrounding yourself with positive people so you don't get drained is important. And then let's talk voice for a moment, since I am a voice coach. Pacing our voice, taking rest periods, uh, you know, drinking water, getting enough rest. All of these things are tied to our vocal instrument, which is going to be the way that we're going to express ourselves. So that's important for us, and that's key so that we don't wear out our physical selves as well. So I want to ask you where you think you can give yourself permission to rest while still staying engaged, right? One thing that my teenage son was actually giving me some encouragement around was I was playing some music this morning when I was making breakfast, and I often have on my news podcast. And he was like, I really like your music, Mom. You should play more music. And I was like, duly noted, right? And that's all I used to do was listen to music. And so that is a small step I'm going to take, which is to step down a little bit from all of the news information and go into the music, go into the creative sphere, and let that feed me in different ways. So let's go ahead and review the 3 steps that we talked about in today's workshop. One is to think about healing your voice scars, right? And that means to look at what messaging you received as a young person, what it made you feel about how you can express yourself, and how are there some ways that you can heal from that today. Step 2 is to use your voice for purpose And you get to choose how to do that. You get to think of how you want to advocate, how you want to mentor, at what level, at what stage. There's no wrong way to do it. It's the way that's going to be safe and sustainable and a little fun, frankly, for you, right? This should fuel us with fun. It should not just be work and punishment. It should be fun. And third, protecting your energy, right? And how do we do that? By setting up some boundaries around ourselves so we don't get overwhelmed. How do we pace our voice so that we don't wear our voice out? And how do we just conserve our spirit so that we have a little left over in the tank for tomorrow? I just want to remind us all that, the forces that be are powerful, but remember they're people. They're people just like you and me. So they're not the air we breathe. They're not the water we swim in. I understand that for so many thousands of years, this has been the system. It feels broken. History repeats itself. It can get very, very discouraging. But if this system over time was built up by people, then this system over time can be brought down by people. And we have seen the change we can make, and we have to believe that we can do that in this day and age. Um, a few ways that I want to invite you in to my community, if it works for you, is to come on over to Love Your Voice. And if you want to take a deep dive into your vocal scar and vocal healing, you are welcome to look through the posts on Love Your Voice. And I also have a workbook called Love Your Voice, which is really about taking this issue on of healing our voice. Hey, Margaret. I see Margaret just joined. And you also are always welcome to reach out if you want to talk to me individually. I love to support clients. I actually feel that that's part of my advocacy is how can I support women to step out in their work roles, in their lives, to speak up and to feel more fully seen and heard, right? That is an act of advocacy. So how can you implement being effective in the ways you're already living in your world? You don't have to go outside of yourself. Look at effective ways you can do. I bet you anything there is someone you could mentor. I bet you anything there's a client who you could help support. And every time those things happen to them, we also get to kind of celebrate being a little bit of that behind the scenes support. So I know that that definitely fills my cup. And that is really what we've got today. So, Margaret, we just were wrapping up, but no fear, because I know, Margaret, that you are in the Love Your Voice community. So we will be sending out the replay of this live workshop recording. I want to thank you all for jumping on the call, and I want you all to stay calm, speak on, and use your voice for the positive change that you want to see happen in the world. I know this was a preachy one this day, but I just have this clarity of mind right now, which is we can do it. We have to do it. And it's people taking on people. That's all it is at the end of the day. None of this is anything other than that. And so if not now, then when? If not us, then who? It's my true belief on this all. All right. So I hope you feel a little fired up and a little motivated and inspired by this. And until next time, you guys, stay calm and speak on. Take care. Bye.